Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny and I'm a Canadian knitter and now spinner living in the beautiful northeast of England. We live about a 10-minute walk from the sea, just south of Northumberland, a really beautiful part of the country, so that is where I am coming to you from today. And I am finally getting around to filming some knitting and crafting goals. Not for the coming year. I'm aware that it's March, late March. Let's be honest, by the time I edit and upload this, April. I'm aware that we're well into the year. But, well, I'll start by giving you a bit of context and why I'm putting this list together now, why I'm doing this for myself, and hopefully, hopefully it will be interesting for you as well. But in case you didn't watch my first video, where I was very, very nervous, I was a pretty avid knitter in the years leading up to the pandemic, and then kind of around 2020, 2021, I started experiencing some new health symptoms. I've always had chronic migraines and various issues, and a lot of new symptoms started cropping up in 2021, and these days, it kind of feels like every time I go to the doctor, I get a new diagnosis. My health is not great, to be honest. I haven't talked about that very much yet. Not because I want to hide it or anything like that, but I guess it's just not very nice to talk about it. It's much nicer to, film these videos when I am feeling good and when I'm feeling excited and when I can share that excitement about crafting with you. So, I haven't talked about it very much, but my health is kind of an ongoing story behind the scenes, and the kind of silver lining to this is that symptoms that really started out affecting my hands and really being quite debilitating in terms of my ability to knit, but also do some basic tasks, have really lessened. I'm having more problems with other parts of my body, other symptoms, but my hands are a lot better. And so in November I started knitting again, and this was a complete revelation, and it's been a godsend. It's been so good for my mental health, and it's been so empowering to be able to do something physical again when I'm losing some of my physical abilities. Hopefully temporarily, hopefully in a fluctuating way, but in other parts of my life and other parts of my body. So that is kind of my story of me and knitting recently. But it's taken me probably about 6 months. Started knitting in November, and for a couple, for really 2 years there, I kind of tried not to look when I passed by yarn stores, and I had yarn sitting in the corner of my apartment. We moved 3 times in that period, and each time I was trucking along yarn that I wasn't sure I was ever going to be able to use. And so I'm getting back into knitting and really starting to make plans for those yarns again, and starting to make plans for being able to do this again. I think it's taken me 6 months to kind of get used to the idea, think about things that I used to do that I'd like to do again, but also really start building up my skill set and really advance beyond where I was as a knitter in 2020, 2021. So that's the kind of context. I hope that hasn't been too much of a downer. I am doing, very well psychologically, emotionally. I'm really lucky. I have a wonderful support system, and I'm able to, move my work life around my health quite a bit. So I'm really fortunate in lots of ways. And the knitting is the biggest way in which I am fortunate. So I've broken my intentions and goals up into a couple of different categories in an effort to make this a bit more legible. I really enjoy watching other people's intentions and goals videos, I think partially because it's a way to learn about new patterns, but also because it's a way to learn about ways in which you might want to level up your own skill set. And I'm a big believer in sticking with where you're comfortable and not pushing yourself to learn new things if it's not going to be fun, or when it's not going to be fun, and I'll talk about that some more. But my hope is that this video won't be purely selfish, that it won't be purely just me planning, but that it might be interesting for you to watch as well. So that is where we are headed. Thank you so much for joining me, and here we go. okay. So I am filming in my front room and it is currently school getting out time. So there are lots of families and children walking by the apartment, which is really lovely. It's a nice kind of noise. But if we get some of that, I apologize. I'll try to edit anything too distracting out, but we'll just have to bear with it a little bit. So starting with kind of overall general intentions. My first and kind of biggest intention is to have fun. That sounds so superficial, but to have fun and to really try to mediate the ways in which I can compromise my own fun. I'm a bit of an anxious person, I'm a bit of an overthinker, and I would like to minimize the ways that I beat myself up. So what this means in practical terms is knit the good yarns and try not to worry quite so much about spending money on something that is giving me so much joy and so many hours of joy. I can tend to add up the amount of the cost that it will take to knit a garment and think, oh, that's really not inexpensive for what the garment will be ultimately. So I'm making an effort to factor in the hours and hours and hours of enjoyment that I will get out of that garment before I'm able to wear it, because I think that actually in my relationship with knitting right now, those hours of enjoyment are a bigger part of my life than the knitted garments are. So knit the good yarns. Stop putting the good yarns on hold and being scared to use them, and maybe buy some more good yarns. Buy some things that are going to make me happy. Now, I certainly don't mean buy the expensive yarns. In fact, lots of the yarns that I'm thinking about in terms of good yarns, which I should really put in quotes, are yarns that have a sentimental value to me and yarns that I'm intimidated to use because of that sentimental value. I'll talk about, I have some plötulopi, and that is a really good example. A fairly affordable yarn actually, but I have been trucking this around for years without letting myself use it. So knit with that. I'm gonna come back around to the plötulopi. So knit the good yarns and don't beat myself up quite so much about the expense. And I know that we're all coming in our relationship with knitting and the cost of knitting from very different angles, from different financial positions, from different comfort levels of what we spend on our hobbies. So that's very personal. And mine, I'm gonna complicate this, this intention slightly by also saying that I want to slow myself down a little bit. I think my motto for knitting for this year especially is going to be fast is not the goal. I am not aiming to finish things as quickly as possible. I'm really aiming to get as much enjoyment and as much time knitting out of them along the way as I can. My hands, though they're much, much better than they were 3 years ago, are also definitely not what they were in 2016 or 2018 or 2019. I can't knit for as long in one go as I used to. I need to take more breaks. I need to be really careful about the way that I stretch my hands and use my hands. I am hypermobile, so I need to be careful that when I get sore, I don't stretch in bad ways. So I just need to be a bit more cognizant, take more breaks, slow things down. So slow things down in terms of my physical ability to knit. But also, I would really like to slow myself down in terms of the kinds of projects that I'm doing. And this goal is one that I'm not going to follow early in the year. Or early in, I keep saying the year even though I don't intend, that's just a turn of phrase. I mean, in this next period of knitting, this isn't going to come into effect right away. I've recently knit quite a few worsted weight projects. I'm planning to start a worsted weight project. I'm planning on starting a few other things that are designed at a big gauge. But in general, once I get through these patterns that I'm really excited to knit, a kind of over a longer period goal for me is to slow myself down. And the ways that I intend to do that without, picking patterns that I don't want to knit or foregoing, if I want to knit something that's going to be fast, I'm going to knit it. But I'm going to keep an eye out and try to find more patterns that are knit at a smaller gauge to slow myself down a little bit. 2 months ago I finished the Alpine Bloom, or the Autumn Alpine, I get those two mixed up, the Autumn Alpine by Caitlin Hunter, Boylan Knitworks, and that was knit at a sport weight but I knitted it at a fingering weight, and I really enjoyed that. So look out for more fingering weight patterns that slow me down a little bit. But also patterns that are slightly more complex designs or textures. Cables can be hard on my hands, so maybe not cables, but maybe some lace weight, and some constructions that might slow me down. So keeping an eye out for those. And fast is not the goal. Those are my kind of overarching intention goals. Moving on to techniques. Sorry, I'm looking down occasionally because I've got some notes here to keep myself on track. So, techniques. I think that this is a partial list. There are definitely more techniques that I haven't thought of to write down, but I've come up with just a kind of partial guiding list, and it's at least the beginning of something, so that then as I think of other things, as I come across other things, as other knitters mention techniques in their podcasts, I can add to the list and keep them in the back of my mind. So here are a few of the techniques that I would really like to try in various projects over the coming period. The first is ladderback jacquard. And I had heard about ladderback jacquard a couple of places, but I didn't really consider doing it seriously until Dorothy at Woolly Chat. Her channel is really chatty and lovely, and she's just a very informed and seems to have lots of resources at her fingers. Dorothy, you're so good at that. So if you haven't checked out her channel, I would definitely recommend that. I'll link it and anything else that I mentioned today below. But she commented on one of my videos and suggested that I should try ladderback jacquard. So I've looked into it more seriously since, and that is definitely on my list. The next technique is to learn to knit continental. I'm not sure if this counts as a technique or really this is a style of knitting. I quite enjoy doing my color work one-handed. That doesn't bother me. Fast is not the goal, so if that ends up being my preference, then I'm very happy to continue knitting that way. But I would like to try knitting color work with both hands, and I would like to see if that is something that suits me. So in order to do that, I want to teach myself continental knitting. I think it was Caitlin Hunter again who I saw somewhere talking about how she knit a full stockinette sweater continental to teach herself to knit that way, and that seems like that just seems like the kind of thing that might work for me. I feel like that might work for me, so maybe at some point I'll try to do a fairly simple stockinette style cowl or sweater or something like that, knit continental to work those muscles, to build that muscle memory, and then try to color work. My third technique isn't really a technique, it's just to get better at color work in general. I have really just started dipping my toe into color work, and I love it. And I love the designs. There's so many things that I want to knit in color work. I'm even starting to play around with designing some of my own color work for myself, and really, really enjoying that. So work in general at building up my color work skill set and getting better at that. Kind of connected to that, but also separate, is I've never steeked anything, and I would really, really like to steek something. I think that the idea of steeking something doesn't really freak me out too much. I tend to work with quite woolly wools, quite grippy wools, the kind of wools where if you drop a stitch, you know, it just sits there waiting for you to pick it up again. I very rarely work with wools where a drop stitch, you know, trails right down and you have to go back and get it. So the idea of steeking doesn't intimidate me overly. That's very easy to say in the abstract. I am sure that when I eventually get there, I will feel very panicked and adrenaline full in the moment. But it doesn't overly intimidate me, and I think that the reason I haven't steeked anything yet is that I'm kind of out of the habit of wearing cardigans. Change is the only constant, and I used to wear cardigans a lot. And I think just in the last couple of years I've fallen out of that a little bit, and I'm not wearing cardigans as much. I'm not knitting cardigans very much. So I think steeking would be so much fun, and it would be a good thing to try, and maybe it'll get me back into wearing cardigans again, because they are such a useful garment. So steek is definitely on my list. Finally, I'd really like to try two-color brioche and get better at brioche knitting in general. I have knit brioche before, must have been 5 or 6 years ago, I think. I'd have to check. but I knit most of the brioche vest by Pearl Soho, and I didn't finish it because I think I knit the entirety of the body and I was really enjoying it, and I was actually less intimidated by brioche than I expected to be, but I made a mistake with one of the increase sections and I just couldn't figure out how to fix my mistake. I wasn't sure how to read the knitting and I just abandoned it. So I would like to go back and learn how to fix my mistakes with brioche. I don't have that project anymore, I frogged it ages ago, but I would like to learn how to fix my mistakes with brioche so that I could finish a project and be more confident. But I'd also really like to try two-color brioche. So that's my very incomplete list of techniques. If there are other techniques that you're planning to build up to in the next couple months or years, or whatever your timeline is, I would love to know, because I want to build up my list. I will say as a kind of caveat to this that I am working on a kind of secret color work, I'll share it, but not until it's done, I don't think, project at the minute. And there were so many things that I was deciding and challenging myself with in that pattern to begin with that I decided not to try ladder back jacquard right away, just because that felt like adding a challenge on top of other challenges, and I didn't feel like that was going to be enjoyable. It just felt like too steep a learning curve at one time. And I want to keep going with that. I am knitting for fun, I'm knitting for enjoyment. This is a hobby that gives me a lot of joy, and I am the kind of person who likes a learning curve. I like to challenge myself, but I'm also going to make a real concerted effort to take those challenges as I'm ready for them. There are a lot of other things going on in life, and comfort knitting is really important as well. So that's my kind of caveat, more a reminder for myself than for you, to be honest, because that isn't always something that I need to give myself a bit more grace about that, I guess is what I'm saying. So those are those are more concrete goals to learn those techniques. Okay, the next category is somewhat more specific or concrete, I guess, yarns and categories of knitting. Constructions that I haven't done before, yarns that I haven't worked with before. And the first on that list is knit more cardigans. As I said before, I just haven't been wearing as many cardigans in the last few years, but they are very useful, and I think partially, I haven't found a style of cardigan that really suits me, or that I feel suits my style now as an adult. Again, Dorothy is knitting the Bonnie cardigan by Orthlane Souche, and I've seen quite a few people working on that cardigan recently, and that one looks like a good one. But it's worsted weight, so it wouldn't slow me down, but that's very interesting. I've got a few other cardigan patterns in mind, so that is definitely something that I'm interested in doing, is finding more cardigan patterns that I'm interested in and casting some on. The next category is saddle shoulder construction, because I have never knit a sweater with a saddle shoulder construction, and they look like they fit really nicely. It's something I'm very interested in, so that is on my list. Next is become more comfortable with bottom-up construction and knit some more seamed garments. I think that bottom up I'd like to become more comfortable with. I have done that before. I did that recently on a vest for my partner, but I think that being comfortable knitting bottom up as well as top down will just open up a lot more patterns for me. I have altered things to be knit top down instead of bottom up, but that's a step that I don't necessarily want to do every time, and I certainly don't want to be picking top down constructions because I'm intimidated by bottom up constructions. And seamed garments I want to work on becoming more comfortable with, because they give more structure, and people talk about how they make garments that last longer. People talk about how a seamed garment often has a bit more integrity in terms of keeping its shape, and those are qualities that really interest me in a garment. I definitely, I knit things to keep them for the rest of my life. I like to keep all of my clothes as long as I possibly can, wear them into the ground. pick things, buy things that will last, that will wear well. So the idea of a seamed garment that will last really nicely is something very interesting to me. And I do actually have a pattern in mind, because I have been watching, especially when I have migraines, I find the Green Bean podcast, Katie Green's podcast on YouTube, really soothing. I just think the combination of the music and her demeanor, that's what I want to watch when I have a migraine lately. And they knit Sylvia Watts Cherry's Caledonia sweater several years ago now, but every time they wear it, I want one. And that is a bottom-up seamed garment. So I am putting that on my list and keeping an eye out for appropriate yarns, and I think that is something that I will try to cast on fairly soon as a kind of first step into a fully seamed garment. I've never done something fully seamed with the sleeves knit separately and then set in, and so that'll be a challenge, but I think a good one. Next up, talking about some yarn. I knit recently with Rowan Valley Tweed, which is not a true woolen, but it is a quite lofty kind of semi-woolen, semi-worsted yarn, and I loved it. It was so warm, or it is so warm, it's so soft. So just as a kind of desire, I want to knit with more woolen yarns. I've never knit with a fully woolen yarn, in part because the price can be a bit prohibitive for me. I can balk a bit at the price. So I think I'll want to think quite carefully about that, but that is kind of a treat that I want to give myself in the next little while, and think quite hard about a garment that I'll really love and wear a lot. And kind of along similar lines, because it has those same kind of very warm properties, is the plötulopi. This is not all of what I have. I'll post a picture. I don't know why, I just grabbed the top ones. I have the two contrast colors, but I have this kind of quite light gray, quite dark gray, and then I have 4 plates of a medium gray. And this is yarn that my mom bought for me it must have been 2019 or maybe even 2018, on a trip to Iceland. My mom went on a work trip to Iceland, spoiled rotten, and I asked her if she would buy some yarn, because of course I knew that the yarn and the knitting tradition in Iceland is so famous and so revered. And at the time, I was picturing lopi, and I didn't really understand what plötulopi was. And my mom is one of my best friends. My mom and I are really close. And she was very excited about this and was very excited to find a yarn store, and she's much more extroverted than I am. I'm extroverted in my living room when I'm talking like this. In social situations I can be quite shy, but Mom is not, so she chatted away with the woman who worked in the knitting store, and she bought a sweater's quantity of plötulopi for me and a sweater's quantity of plötulopi for herself. And in the years since, she's kind of realized that sweater knitting is not her thing. She loves to sew, she loves to bake, she loves those kinds of things. Knitting, not her favorite, whereas I don't love baking or sewing nearly as much as she does, but I'm a big knitter. So I put off knitting with this because I didn't really realize what plötulopi was, and I am intimidated by the unspun, by this yarn that is unspun. But I also put it off because that learning curve combined with this wool that is so meaningful. My mom and I, live on different continents and don't get to see each other nearly as much as either of us would like. So I feel like it's extra precious. It's yarn that my mom bought me on a trip that she went to, that gave her a lot of joy. And I've let that become a bit of a kind of mythology around this yarn that has made it very intimidating to pick up and knit with. And that has resulted in this getting trucked around from apartment to apartment with me for many years. So I am going to get over that and use that, because if my hands get bad and I have to stop knitting for a short period of time or a more extended period of time again, I don't want to feel like I've wasted the opportunity to knit with this beautiful yarn. So hopefully some of these health issues will actually help me to become better at using the good stuff and enjoying the good stuff while I can. And I have actually swatched. I haven't totally finalized. I've narrowed my pattern choice down to a few things. I haven't fully decided, and I think that this will probably be the next thing I film an episode about, because I'm going to cast it on right away once I decide. So I won't talk about pattern choice now. I'll talk about that in probably the next video I film. But I guess it's worth saying that I was intimidated about working with unspun yarn in particular because I'm a very tight knitter, and the yarn can, well, maybe I can even show you kind of at the edge here. Right, so here's the swatch, and it's just the yarn, kind of the guard hairs and the kind of lighter hairs, and the lighter hairs just held together by the way that the yarn is processed. There is no spin. I keep calling it yarn. It really is just wool. It's not yarn yet. And so it does just pull apart, you know? And I'm a quite tight knitter, which I had read can make working with plötulopi quite difficult. But I think knitting this swatch has really boosted my confidence, and I feel like it's not going to be so bad. And the reason that I feel like it's not going to be so bad is the reason I am a tight knitter. I think rather than really pulling the yarn very tight, I do hold quite tight tension, but I think one of the reasons that my knitting is so tight is I tend to knit quite close to the tips of my needles. And the trick to plötulopi, and the reason that it can make such a kind of sturdy, strong garment once it is knit up, has a lot to do with staple length, which, if you saw my last video, you know that I'm dipping my toe into spinning. I'm so excited about spinning, so this all makes a lot more sense to me now that I'm reading all about spinning. But let's see if I can pull out one of these guard hairs to show you. So I've just pulled out one guard hair. You're probably not going to be able to see the hair itself because it's so light colored. But there, I'm holding it at the ends of my fingers there, and that's how long it is. So that's part of what makes this yarn usable, and it's what makes the yarn really strong once it's knitted up in a garment, is those guard hairs are so long that if you stay within, you know, if you're working within that distance, then it is going to hold the other hairs together, it's going to make it usable, and that won't pull apart. The individual hairs won't pull apart. It's only if you're holding the yarn farther away than that staple length that it's going to rip on you. So this is the theory, at least, what I've gathered from, I've been doing a lot of reading about this, I've been watching a lot of blog posts about, watching a lot of YouTube videos about this. I am no authority, I haven't put it into practice beyond this swatch yet, so we'll see how it goes, but that is my understanding, and I am feeling much more confident. So I've done a couple of different swatches, kind of figuring out what weight I would like to knit this at. This swatch, I think this is a 5mm on this side and a 5.5mm on this side. I am a very tight knitter, so that might be different than the results that other people would get with the same needles. But I'm quite excited, and actually I swatched with the mid-gray color, so you can see the three colors there. So, plötulopi. The other thing to say about this is I am knitting with a plötulopi held double. I have read that that is the best way to start off, that it makes it much easier, that the wool holds together much more when you hold it double. So I'm knitting with it double. I imagine that I would eat lots of my words of confidence if I was knitting with it single, but that is another goal. Especially if I enjoy knitting this first project, then I would really like to knit something with plötulopi held single. One more goal in this category in terms of yarn is to knit with my handspun. I just realized that I didn't bring my handspun in, but I will put a picture of it up here. I've got some more hand spun that's ready to be applied, and I am really on a roll with that. That is definitely something that has slowed me down, filling in lots of time when I don't quite have an active knitting project on the go, or I feel like I'm moving too quickly through something that I'm knitting. I've been picking up the spinning instead, and I'm really, really enjoying that. So the spinning has been really good. I'm spinning away. It's still quite slow going. I don't have tons of yarn to work with, but I really want to not be too precious with that yarn. It is very precious, it feels very precious, but I want to use it. I want to have fun with it. So that is another goal. All right. One more category that I wanted to include was other arts and fiber crafts. I have mentioned the spinning. The spinning is such a big part of my life right now. I'm very excited about that. I have lots of other goals in terms of spinning. I don't think I'll go into this too much here because it could take up quite a bit of time, but I'm really interested in learning to spin with other spindles. So far I've tried top whirl drop spindles and Turkish spindles, and I'm spinning worsted from commercially combed top. I'd really like to experiment with other spindle types and other fiber preps. I would also really like to learn to spin woolen, or at least semi-woolen, learn to spin long draw. I don't think I'm quite ready for that yet. I need to kind of be perfect. I need to become more comfortable with what I'm doing at the moment, but those are kind of some of my farther reaching goals with spinning. But some other fiber crafts that I'm really interested in, I'd really love to try some natural dyeing. This is actually how I discovered the Min Wolden challenge, which is Yente, through some natural dyeing videos that she had done, and I just think that that would be so much fun and a good way to kind of dip your toe into dyeing. Spring, as we're coming up to spring, this would be a really good time for me to start dyeing, actually. I'm not sure if I'll manage it quite yet because you need some setup and some kind of separate equipment from your kitchen equipment, you know, to keep everything safe, and I don't have that all together yet. But I would really like to try dyeing with nettles in particular. Nettles are really, really abundant where I live in this part of the UK. Really in every part of the UK that I've lived, nettles are really abundant. And because they are prickly, because they can really grow and you know, reach out and take over a space, people tend to cut them back, especially around public parks and things like that. If there's a wooded area, the nettles tend to get cut back anyways. So I think that if I can nip in at some point and get some of those nettles before they're cut back, that would be a really kind of sustainable way to try some natural dyeing and hopefully get some interesting grays and greens. So that's my ultimate goal for natural dyeing. We'll see if I'm able to do that anytime soon, but it's in my periphery, it's in my vision. I'm also very interested in weaving. I have never done any weaving, and I'm not overly interested in large-scale weaving, I have to admit. Maybe because I just think it looks like a lot of bending over, which I think would be really hard to do right now. But I'm very interested in, you see people doing quite small-scale weavings, wall hangings, or you know, coasters, or those kinds of things, and having lots of fun with different designs, representational designs, more abstract geometric designs. And I've seen, you know, just various examples of people making small looms out of old sturdy picture frames, those kinds of things. So I'm interested in that. That seems like a scale of weaving that I'd really like to give a try and just have some fun with at some point this year. That seems achievable. So weaving is on the list. And then finally, I did want to talk a little bit about things that I don't plan to do, that I don't plan to work on or look for patterns for. And the first item on this list is a bit of a cheat because it is something that I put on this list when I initially made it and was thinking about making this video, and I think just the act of putting it on the list and thinking about it enough to put it on the list made me realize that actually maybe I would like to knit this. And so I've bumped this up. This is a bit of a cheat. It's not actually in this part of the list. It's in the category of things I would like to knit, and that is socks. I've never knit socks before, and I've never been particularly interested in knitting socks, but thinking about it more and more, that would be a really nice project to have in between bigger projects as a break alongside more complicated projects. Once I get comfortable with knitting socks, I mean, something to have alongside on the go. And I do really enjoy wearing warm knitted socks, particularly around the house. I feel like a lot of people in my life would like to receive knitted socks as gifts. So I think that is something that I will have to do. I need to take it back, and I will be knitting socks at some point. Things that I actually don't plan to do, though, at least at this stage, are knit anything with a drop shoulder construction. I love the drop shoulder sweaters that other people are knitting, but I have quite narrow shoulders, and when I have tried on drop shoulder constructions before, I just haven't liked the way that they fit on my body. I haven't liked the way that they make me feel. I realize that this wouldn't be an issue with all drop shoulder constructions, but I can also be very sensitive to seams that don't fall where it feels like seams should fall, if that makes any sense. I do have a few items of clothing. I think I have a dress with some panels, and one of the seams hits around here where a drop shoulder seam would hit if the construction had seams, and it makes me feel like something's falling off my shoulder constantly, and it drives me absolutely nuts. So I don't think I love the way drop shoulder constructions look on my body, but I think that they could also be something that I would find kind of stressful to wear. So at least for now, even though I love them aesthetically, not for me, drop shoulder constructions. And the other big category in this part of my list is summer garments. I have knit with some linen and cotton before, and I think they look absolutely beautiful, but I found them very hard on my hands back when my hands were a lot healthier. So I just don't think that it's worth it now. I'm a pretty cold person, and the season for wearing really warm summer garments in the northeast of the UK is pretty small. So I'm not sure that it would be the best, making to wearing proportion ratio to knit summer garments. But I do have an exception to this, and the exception is that I have some silky lace from Rowan, which is 65% cotton and 35% silk, and it's absolutely beautiful, and I have 2 balls of that left over from a shawl that I knit for my wedding, actually. Our wedding was a bit of an adventure. We were one of those couples who we had to cancel our original wedding in 2020, which we thought initially was going to have consequences for my visa. We were able to sort that out, but it was very, very stressful for a little while, I will tell you. And we ended up, when it was possible to get married again, we'd canceled the wedding, we'd had guests from, more than one continent who were supposed to come, and it was all just very stressful. So we ended up kind of eloping with just some immediate family present, and that was really lovely. So I knit a scarf that was originally going to be for this bigger party and ended up being for this small intimate ceremony, and I have really, really lovely memories associated with both knitting and wearing that garment. And I have a bit more of that yarn left. So not interested in knitting summer garments in general, at least not right now, but I am definitely on the lookout. I'm going to be very picky though. I'm on the lookout for kind of a perfect pattern to knit with that yarn. That is the end of my list of goals and intentions as they stand right now. One thing that I haven't talked about because I wasn't sure where to put it in the list was crochet. And to be as succinct about this as I possibly can, I learned to both knit and crochet as a child. I have very distinct memories of my paternal grandmother, who I loved to pieces, teaching me to crochet especially, and I really crocheted seriously before I ever knit seriously. And I moved over more to knitting for various reasons. Looking back now, I can see that the way that it was turning my wrists and the way it was using my hands was causing me pain in a way that makes more sense now and didn't make as much sense at the time. I don't think I really was fully cognizant of that at the time. So I'm a bit hesitant about crochet because I think it could cause some problems for my wrists especially. But I do love crochet. I feel like patterns for crochet, there are just so many more patterns for crochet now than when I was really interested in crochet 10 years ago. It's just a really exciting space. There's so many exciting patterns. So I'm not quite sure where to put that yet because I'm a bit nervous about going back to crochet. I'm not sure how that will work exactly, but it's in the back of my mind. It's not quite in the to-do list. It's not quite in the I'm not interested list. It's hovering somewhere outside any of those categories. So that is the end of the things that I wanted to share with you today. I hope that some of this will have been interesting for you. I'm aware that this is not a very spring-based list, and I've seen a few other people talking about their specific spring goals. I'm so excited about getting back into knitting, and I'm so excited about knitting patterns that I haven't been able to knit. I think that for all intents and purposes, I'm going to ignore the seasons in terms of my knitting for the foreseeable future, at least until, if it gets too hot and it's not comfortable to knit with a heavy wool, then obviously I'll stop. But otherwise, it stays pretty cool here. I'm just gonna keep knitting like it's winter. I'm gonna knit exactly what I want to knit, when I want to knit it, as far as is possible. So thank you again so much for joining me. I really appreciate you being here. I have been absolutely terrible at asking that you like and subscribe to these videos if you enjoy them. Please do. It's really nice to know that people are watching, that this is reaching some people. So if that's something you're comfortable doing, please do. And I've been really enjoying it. So I guess a final goal and intention is to keep doing this, to keep kind of charting my return to knitting and the things that are giving me so much joy. I will leave you there without rambling too much more, and hopefully be back with another video soon. Thanks again, and I hope you've got some good making time in your future.